Hello and welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
Gerard.
I'm Dan.
And this is a series where we talk about speculative stories in all their forms. We're a bit short on attendance today, but we are going to be continuing our discussion of Parable of the Talents, which is the second book in the Earthseed duology by Octavia E Butler. We read approximately 100 pages every week. We will probably go up to chapter 17 or 18 for next week. We'll decide after the recording, but we'll post it in the description. The short story for today is Monster by Gerard Klein, and the short story for next week is going to be The Man Who Lost the Sea, Theodore Sturgeon, by Theodore Sturgeon. We are working our way through the big book of science fiction, and both of these stories are from that. We're just working our way in the order they are printed in the book, which is also the publication order for these stories. With all that said, Jared and Dan, what do you guys think of this particular section of Parable of the Talents? I had to put the book down and stare into space for a while to recover from chapter 11, but
Yeah. I mean, I might discuss things of the previous chapters too, because I wasn't there in the discussion, so I might confuse things as I read it all together in one. But
yeah, please do. Everything that happens before the chapters we read is fair game for discussion every week. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. Why don't you start, Dan, because you weren't here last.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the last chapter was shocking. Well, a lot of this was shocking. For me, the slave collars are some of it's
horrifying.
It's one of the most horrifying things I've read, to be honest. Like the way it just takes away completely the agency from these people. They're not even people anymore. They're like nothing. There's no way you can get out of it. Like, I guess you could kill yourself by getting tortured for 8 hours or something, or even more, but I don't.
Yeah.
And apparently, if you kill the master, or the person who's running the slave collars, then you die too. Or there's no way you can ever free yourself, which is insane. Like, it has, and it's not like something completely off the charts, because the whip was used to the same effect, like during the period of slavery, but it wasn't quite this brutal, I imagine. But,
yeah, it wasn't this controlling. It's really kind of interesting because there must have been something about the 90s that brought out these ideas, because Donaldson had a very similar kind of slave collar. It wasn't described as a collar, but he had a very similar thing in his Gap Cycles sci-fi series, and equally horrifying. And so the reading this now was just like, especially because you knew about the collar when she got Marcus, which that was a really, chapter 6 was a really powerful chapter when she found her brother and he had the collar on. And so you're told a little bit about it then, but then you see the real, you get a real, the full, spectrum of how horrible these collars are when we get to chapter 11. And wow, that was a powerful chapter. It was heartbreaking. It was everything that, because this whole time you're with her, you're with Olamina, like, yes, build up this great society, build up this town. Everything's going great, and you still got stuff to worry about, but it was a beautiful place, and it's all gone now. It's horrifyingly gone.
yeah, and the escalation of the attack, right? People have been walking into these communities and destroying them with fire or whatever, but they've been sort of manual attacks. So the fact that these tanks almost come and attack them, and several of them together, that the escalation of that was horrifying, and also it almost made made sense because that's the only way you can destroy this community now, by really bringing the firepower, because they have they have at least one armored truck and they might bring another. They do things very safely by keeping watches and stuff. So any damage caused by attacks similar to what happened in Duff Creek, for instance, would probably not get very far. So it all happened over the course of one chapter, the whole
Barely, yeah. Like a
escalation.
couple of
And
pages.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
and it
was
feels like also because we went through the whole process of her building this up, so it feels even worse just losing it all. Before, at least when it happened in the first book, it was like it's already there, right? It's like something left over from before. It's not something
Right.
they built up themselves from nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Like they just didn't do a good job of protecting what they had, and they did the best they could. But this is something that, and the fact that they were trying to develop some safety around it, they started to feel comfortable with thinking, like started to look forward to the future. Right? And she even says that, I think, in the chapter just before this one, where she says, I feel settled enough now to think about Earthseed as a whole instead of just the community. And then this happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
And even the previous one was like, okay, well, you can see, oh, maybe if they did this thing or if they did that other thing, they could have defended themselves, right, or something.
Yeah.
But this one is like, what could they have done? Like, there's nothing.
Well,
Right?
there was nothing, right? The first book was chaotic. The way that their town fell, it wasn't coordinated. It was just kind of random seeming, and how all the fires broke out and stuff, and how they lost their community in the first book. And she did everything in her power to prepare against that very sort of thing. And then something comes along that is just way beyond their level of what they're prepared can be, even possibly be prepared for. And it's yeah, very devastating. You got to wonder, like, where can this go from here? Like,
Yeah.
how is she going to get out of this? Is she going to get out of this? It's wow.
Yeah. I think, like you said, it's like previous one was chaos. Like the perpetrators, like they're damaged people, I guess. It wasn't in there wasn't as much maybe malice, as much like wrong intent and coordinated and planning as this one. Like this one feels somewhat worse to me, because at least before it was like, you can say over crazy people, drug addicted,
Yeah,
they're not.
right. Yep.
Obviously they did terrible things. Obviously, I'm not saying it's like it was good, but somehow it feels worse. This one, I don't know. Like the way they're
Yeah, it
talking, the way
is.
they're making them do things, it's like horrible.
Yeah, it is though. Like they were happy to, like, horrible as it sounds, the ones from the previous book burnt they burnt the houses down. I don't know if they willfully killed people. That's
Yeah,
unclear
they
to
did do
me.
that too.
Yeah, they did. Like, I mean, I don't know if the people were collateral damage or if maybe they did. Yeah, I think they at least shot at them and stuff when they saw people running away. But I feel like wanting to enslave people somehow is worse than wanting to kill them. Like this need to own them and exert power over them. I think that is worse.
Yeah, it was a targeted conquest with slavery in mind, and because they were prepared for that, and with resources behind them to have that targeted conquest. Whereas in the first book, it was people who were desperate and crazy enough to pull off something like destroying a town to get resources and just to get stuff to survive and have their own little gang. This was not that. This was a conquest, a specific conquest, something targeted. They had resources. They were making a statement, and they have a mission, and they're very militaristic, and yeah, just so a whole different level of horror here we're witnessing.
And I have to say, this whole the whole I was again very surprised in this book by a couple of things that I thought were very smart that she was able to put them in, like, what was it, 20, 30 years ago almost? And they feel so real. Like the first one was when where they mentioned the bullets, the news bullets, and it was like, oh, it was like 20 words or something, and they were saying, oh yeah, most people just think they're enough to
Yeah.
get the whole version. And I was like, did you just think about like Twitter and news getting through Twitter like 30 years ago? That's pretty, like, the whole discourse about that sort of thing versus more long form journalism. That's very current, right?
Sure.
When it wasn't at the time. And also like the new president and all this sort of thing. Well, one, make America great again. Obviously, there was a Reagan phrase, but the fact that he came back now and she also used it back in the book, and this is set in like 6 years from now, so it's like it's not that much off, right? And the whole rhetoric and the whole, like Vic specifically says, he's targeting like these young men. They're disenfranchised. They don't, they see this as a way of taking control. It's like, I don't know. It's very intelligent that she was able to put these themes and they're so current, I feel.
Yep. Yeah, we brought that up last week too. The
Yeah.
the prescience of that she had, and hopefully she definitely takes it to a. I think this last chapter went a little bit beyond what her prescience told us in the first few chapters in the book. But yeah, it was still some amazing stuff that she came up with. That when you look at the time she was in when she was writing this, if you took a good long look at what was going on in the world, you may have been able to predict some of that stuff, but it wouldn't have been easy. And she did it better than most, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Very impressed. And it just feels so much worse because, yeah, right, you can see parallels in current world.
Oh yeah,
right.
And that's what some of the greatest science fiction does is to point out parallels in the future that people come to see. It's
yeah
stuff.
But it's kind of like, it's interesting because I don't think many of these science fiction writers were thinking, oh, I wonder what people will think 40 years or 50 years down the line about my work when the time I'm talking about finally comes, right?
Yeah,
who
it
knows?
probably had fun. Not in this book, obviously, predicting the future, perhaps, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this is a very, very brutal view of the world. And yeah, like you both said, it's not too far off from where we are now. And obviously, we're not experiencing an apocalypse, but in terms of how people react to world events, the kinds of people who are leaders today, and I guess some of the bigotry. Like, obviously, there's no slavery to the level that's here, but some of the bigotry and hatred that keeps coming up in these books. Yeah, it's all pretty. I think Jared, you used the word, used the phrase "punch in the gut." So yeah, they
Yeah.
they really
And
were.
And the funny thing is throughout the whole book up until now, you were given doses of her daughter's pessimism and her her skepticism and her really being down on her mother. And you the whole time you're like, wow, she's so great. Why is she like that?
Mm.
And then of course now you see what happens, and you're like, okay, so she's been taken, the baby, who's later on writing this, and so you start to wonder, okay, how did she get to the point where she's writing this stuff? And she's able to put her mother's thoughts on paper, and she's able to put her own thoughts on paper. And you start to think, oh, maybe she had a point. Maybe maybe she needs to be mad at her mother for not going with Benko to the other place, and or being so stubborn about wanting to start the Earthseed religion and stuff like that. So you definitely get a new view of her because she wasn't quite likable before, but now you're kind of more understanding of where she's coming from.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and maybe I feel slightly differently than before. I mean, we still don't know whether it was if she'll get the baby back and it's general neglect of her during her upbringing in favor of Earthseed, or if she's been separated from her now
Right.
and that led to a poor life for her and that's what she's blaming her mother for. But there is this, so the attack that happened on that community, it wasn't to kill the leader of the group, right? It was for everybody. So if she had left and gone to Halstead, she would have survived. Probably no one else would have. And I think it's safe to say that that would have been really hard for her to live with, or she would have maybe gone and done something about it, even if it means putting herself in danger. So if this is what she's faulting her for not going to Halstead, then I feel sort of less sympathetic towards her, versus if it was, okay, she gave all her time to Earthseed, she never had time for me. That is something that I can see how that makes sense. But regardless, I think she probably had a bad life if she got separated from her, or if she didn't, then yeah. Anyway, like I'm still very curious about her reasons for the intense dislike she seems to have for her mother, or and her need to nurture the religion. It doesn't seem to be a philosophical issue. It's she wronged me by doing this. So
Yeah, I mean, it depends. If she grew up in slavery because of what her choice of her mother, then I can see her being somewhat, not happy with that.
yeah,
But we'll
Yeah.
see, I guess.
that's true. Yeah, but also not for not going to Halstead, maybe just for starting the religion at all. But that
Maybe.
was also part of what gave, because that's what put them on the radar for these guys. But also that was what gave them the sense of unity and the sense of community that they have, and the goal that we're working towards it. Maybe not phrasing it as a religion and phrasing it as a philosophy would have helped, I don't know. But even things like that, they eventually get promoted to cult status. For people who are ready to find an excuse to hate, I don't think changing the name of it would have changed much.
I don't know. Maybe if they said they were Christian and they kept doing, maybe
yeah.
it would have been fine. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Probably wouldn't have, because right now we've heard like, oh, people are talking about this weird cult and stuff like that. If they just kept things normal, they would just be one other community, maybe, and they wouldn't attract so much attention.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I wonder if she's going to explain where the attention came from. Like, where did these guys? Why was this community targeted so hard? Like, how far did this information about Earthseed or about Acorn specifically? How far did that travel? Because the local communities knew about Acorn and their philosophy and stuff like that, but how far did it go to have this kind of mass targeted attack by this very militaristic organization here?
I kind of assumed this sort of thing was happening in other communities too around this time, but I guess we don't know, right?
Yeah, I don't really know. We know that what was the other community that fell earlier?
Dovetree,
but that didn't seem like
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
That was more chaotic, I think, than.
No, but they were still the same people, maybe. But I guess it wasn't. Maybe they were acting on their own, not acting under an organization. But it was still more coordinated than normal attacks, right?
It was okay. All right.
Yeah.
And they were also wearing the uniform of the people who with the cross and everything.
Right. But the woman who got away, she didn't make any mention of like the slave callers and stuff
No,
like
no.
that.
I think
So
that one before seemed like they were just some followers independently acting, and this one seems more like there's a plan or something, right?
yeah, highly organized. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's similar vein, I guess. Similar people, maybe, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
The brother Marcus talks about a senator who was apparently what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, Never mind. Basically, calling them Satan worshippers and saying they're horrible. So the guy knows nothing about them, but for all we know, what he said or the seeds he planted resulted in this attack on their community. So he doesn't even know who they are, and he just used them as a tool for his propaganda, and they end up being hurt.
Yeah.
That yeah. So speaking of Marcus, the chapter where we find him, that was brilliant. But the bit that stood out most to me, apart from chapter 11, of course, was the one in which he tries to preach a sermon, and she sets him up for failure, or she allows him to, knowing that she's setting him up for failure. Yeah, and that was a really interesting section because I didn't know whose side to take in that. It felt like a situation that needed the taking of sides, but both of them felt so wrong in their in their ways. It like both of them had their justifications, I suppose, but yeah, like you're both are being horrible to each other.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that they were, I don't know, like the fact that they both had to sort of be leaders, like they I don't know, if I found my brother or whatever family that I lost completely after so many years that I thought was dead, I was like, from both of them, I would try to stay together, right? Like, and have a falling out over such a thing, like they consider that to
Hmm.
be more important, was, I don't know, quite telling about both of their
Yeah,
personality, I think.
yeah, I agree, and this might be my bias against real world religions showing, but I feel like it's slightly more. Uh, I would find fault with Marcus slightly more than with Lauren because, well, for one, she has a more objective approach to her preaching, right? Like it's, let's talk about it, and Marcus is like, nope, no discussion, and he had to struggle to find ways to accommodate the discussion aspect of
Mhm.
the gatherings. But more importantly, what he was trying to preach is your belief sucks. I'm here to tell you why you are wrong. Which, for being like after whatever he's been through, to find a place to call home and his family again, and then to sort of destroy the root that it is based on, that just feels vicious to me. And I don't And maybe he thinks that he's quote unquote saving these people. Like that's a thing with religious leaders, I suppose. But so maybe in his head he's doing the right thing, but on the face of it, that that bothered me
Yeah.
quite a lot.
Well, it's a very complex situation because you gotta like Marcus only knew what his father had taught him before he was taken away, and the Olamina had already had these thoughts prior to that events and had worked through them and built them up over a long period of time, where she's had the means to do so. Marcus did not have any means. He didn't have any means of growth. He didn't have any, because he was taken and he was made a slave. And the so you could say his growth was stunted in a way, and we've seen that stubborn streak in their family before with his older brother. So we know that they will come to loggerheads over whatever whatever it is. So I'm not so sure that I think religion was the tool for them to come over loggerheads with, but it could have very well been something else eventually. I have a feeling that they both inherited that stubborn streak from their father, and that their differences are not so easily worked out, regardless of what the cause is. And I think she did a great job of bringing that family trait out in them that we saw in the first book with his older brother, her younger half brother, but between him and their father as well. And so that it just resonated so well that with their characterizations up to this point and what we've seen in the past. Very well done. Powerful scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also this aspect of we talked a little bit during the first book about how much can you trust Lauren about her interpretations of the reasons or like the motivations for people's behaviors, right? So it and her interpretations seem a little strange, but also we're reading the journals like for in the case of Marcus. I mean, I'm not easily buying into her descriptions of like why she thinks that Marcus is behaving the way he is, like his need to lead, and this is what she could very well be right, but I'm like that's just your understanding of the situation. But then when he decides to leave over it and doesn't believe her when she says no, I didn't just tell them to ask you questions that would make you look stupid, then I think maybe that settled it. Like now I know to trust that she knows her brother a little bit. So
Yeah.
Very well done. Yeah.
Talking about religion, I was wondering, Varsha, well, actually, is it explained in this book what like the actual parable of the talents is? Is it described? It is described, right?
yeah, in the first part of this book, I think it was about like she tells us a story about how there was a lord who gave his servants some talents. I assume that's coins
Yeah,
of some
coins.
form, and he gives one person one coin, another person 2 coins, and another 4. And the ones who get 2 and 4 go and do something about it. The one who gets 1 buries it, and the master punishes him for that.
Yes.
But I can't say I fully understood the point of that.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
I was
why did
wondering.
the guy who buried it? Like, I almost thought the conclusion of that story will be that the guy who buried it will be the winner, but the ones who go out and multiply it
Yes.
get rewarded. So
I think the idea is that the talents are your talents, like your gifts that God gives you. And if you don't use them, if you just keep them for yourself, you're going to get punished. If you actually use them for the better of God and the community and everyone else, then you're going to get rewarded. I think
got
that's
it.
the
Okay,
idea.
that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that absolutely makes sense.
Okay. And I don't know, is in the first book, the parable of the sower is not described though? Or is it?
Not that I
Okay.
remember.
Yeah.
No, it
Yeah,
is.
I actually well,
Is
no,
it?
it's not. But
No.
I read an interview with Butler,
Mhm.
and they asked her why she used an actual parable from the Bible for the second book, whereas the first one's not an actual one from the Bible. And it had something to do with what you just said about the gifts and stuff like that. But the sower was directly related to planting seeds, and so she made that up for that purpose.
I thought the parable of the sower in the first book was referencing an actual parable of, when, like, I think the parable is something like there's a guy throwing down seeds, and then some of
Yeah.
them go on the
No.
road and they become garbage and they become nothing, and some go in fertile ground, and some go in the thorns and they get destroyed, and only the ones that go on the good ground actually make good plants and fruits. But the farmer sows them everywhere, and he doesn't know where they're going to end up, but only the ones that actually end up in fertile soil will bear fruits. I think that's like a metaphor for like,
It was
preaching, and then some people are being
Yeah.
receptive and some not.
It was a passage from the Bible, but it wasn't an actual parable.
Oh, okay, I see.
That she
Hmm.
there was a passage she used at the very end of that book. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering what Varsha thought, since you didn't grow up as in a Christian culture?
About the parable?
In general, like these parables and the sort of Christianity and the way it's shown in these books
Hmm.
from an outside perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. So regarding the stories themselves, there are not quite the same, but similar stories, but not, and they are sort of dispersed over some religious texts, and mostly stories like the Panchatantra, where there are morals, and Vikram Vetal, which is the story of a ghoul that a king rescues. And the ghoul says, I'll come with you if you listen to the story and answer the question I have at the end of it. But there are two conditions. If you open your mouth, I will run away. But if you know the answer to the question and you don't answer, your head will explode into a million pieces. and so Vikram keeps answering the question, because I think having the ghoul run away is the preferable option to having his head explode. And he poses a question to him at the end of each story, and Vikram keeps answering until, like, eventually it ends with the ghoul saying, "Okay, I give up. I'm coming with you. You've proved your mettle. I will follow you after all." Whatever. At least that was what was in the version of the story I read. But yeah, there are these various collections that are sort of stories within stories, so which have similar, I guess you'd call them parables, similar like morals and roots for them. So yeah, they aren't in the Bible though. They're not like in religious texts, so they're not, this is what God says, so you have to follow it, sort of, if that makes sense. It's more in the direction of, here's something for you to think about, especially the Vikram Vetal one, right? Like they're all morally complex situations that you're forced to think about, and it's not always clear who's right and who's wrong. And also, if you're interested, there is this excellent movie based on that story. Like, it's a Tamil language film, but they have subtitles. I think it's on Netflix. It's called Vikram Veda. I'll send you the link, but if you're interested. But yeah, it, and I don't know how the parables are treated and like how a sermon goes. Like when Marcus says, for instance, that no, you can't ask me questions, I will only preach. I don't know, like, do all sermons go that way, or is it? I guess Sunday school people are allowed to ask questions, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, doing
So
Matthew. Well, it depends what denomination of Christian you are, I guess. But yeah, but I think parables are more like metaphors to understand certain theological ideas, sort of.
yeah. Okay.
More than
Yeah.
points of I mean, everything is a point of discussion, I guess.
Yeah.
Can be.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So theological ideas was like, I think in the stories that I grew up with, for instance, were more like moral/philosophical ideas, which I guess the theological ideas eventually maybe translate to.
Yeah, but I think parables, you're not supposed to wonder like, oh, I wonder who's right or who's wrong. Like, there's one interpretation, general interpretation that you can sort of agree, then you can just, I guess, not everyone agrees. It's shown that there's a lot of different Christians, but that's the general idea, I think.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you disagree in the Catholic school, you get the ruler across the knuckles. So.
I like my knuckles. But the other thing that I highlighted about that, again, like as an outside perspective, I think the thing, and this came up not just in this book, but in other places too. I went to a convent school, by the way, so I did grow up with some Christian, like exposure to some Christian lore and mythology, I suppose. But like we used to say the Lord's Prayer every day.
Okay.
Yeah. The what was I going to say though? Yeah, the contradictions in the Bible. I think that keeps standing out to me as, and this comes up in a lot of public discourse as well, right? Like, especially when we're talking about marital rights and human rights and whatnot. Like, the Bible says this, but it also says these 20 other things that are all in contradiction to each other. Which one are you supposed to take and interpret the right way?
I think it depends what Christian denomination you're part of.
Yeah, that
right.
right.
How closely you follow the literal text. Right.
Yeah. Whether you believe that it's metaphorical and open to interpretation, or yeah. Yeah, and how open you are about like saying, no, this is fine. I have a different sense of morality too. And I guess it goes back to that other thing we talked about during the Malazan discussion about like, do you have a sense of morality outside of religion? Is that even possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that these last Christian people we found in the book in chapter 11, their morality is wrong. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. This the he calls them heathens, right? And whatever it a- and again, I think this is really resonant because a lot of this rhetoric was used during colonialism, like calling people
Mhm.
heathens and enslaving them because they are equivalent to animals, like not taking the evidence that they are as human as you are and allowing yourself to treat them differently because they don't follow the same religion as you do or they don't look like you, whatever. I think, yeah, allowing yourself cruelty in the name of God in general is just something that doesn't make sense to me. I refuse to believe that there's anything in the Bible or any religious text that tells you that, or that if that's your interpretation of it, then you're straight up wrong. Or
Yeah.
the book is wrong, but
Yeah.
that behavior
Yeah.
is not right.
There actually is plenty in the Bible that has that kind of language, but
Okay.
Yeah,
So
like the Old
some
Testament.
people,
There's a lot of weird
yeah,
stuff in the Old Testament.
yeah, there is. Some people choose to ignore it. But yeah, and it's interesting because she has a big conversation with her husband
Mhm.
about her religion. That like they finally have this talk about what she hopes to accomplish and what she because this whole time he's been kind of like, okay, yeah, okay, hun, yep, this is great, yeah, you can do this and all that stuff, and then of course he gets this, he's trying to convince her to leave and all that stuff, uh, and so they finally sit down and have this big talk about what her plans are, why she doesn't want to leave and all that stuff, and she says, and she admits to him, that yeah, I'm afraid all the time, and but um he she and she says, yes, I do doubt my own abilities sometimes, but she says that's where faith comes in. I guess it always comes sooner or later into every belief system, and in this case it's have faith and work your ass off, and but she's still afraid, so she admits, she shows some vulnerability in admitting some of this stuff to him. And I thought that was also a very powerful conversation between them, and a really good talk that really just broke down a lot of stuff between them. And, I thought it was a little condescending on Bancole's part to say, well, welcome to adulthood, um, you wonder if he regrets that now, because that was right before chapter 11. So
It also, I don't know, like their whole relationship, it just makes me feel weird. I don't know. I can't approve of it. It just, I don't know. It just feels wrong. Even though it's not described as wrong, really, it just feels wrong. I don't know.
yeah, I do wonder about that as an artistic choice. Like I don't really have a problem with it. Something that maybe I don't let myself think about it too much, but it desperate times two very lonely people found each other. That's
Yeah.
fine. But I'm more curious about, say, Butler's reasons for choosing a character who's as old as her father for her to be married to. Is it so he's not around um, through most of the building of Earthseed to whatever point they get
Yeah.
to that makes a god out of her.
It just feels like the way she describes him and the way she described her relationship with her father, like it just seems too connected. And the way he talks about, like, he often talks about how young she is and like, or says, oh, you're like a child, or thinks something like it. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's I don't know. It just, they both feel slightly off. Not as in like malicious, but as in a,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like they work around each other instead of working with each other, right? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and the way they view each other, I don't think it's like, I don't know. In a perfect situation, it probably, I don't know, would be more wrong than that situation, I guess, but it just feels slightly off.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the age gap is interesting. She was very much an adult. That was made clear to us when she made the decision to date him, but also, yeah, I guess minus the apocalypse, that's something that we'd have to think about more. But
Yeah, and you gotta remember too that this apocalypse is a it's not this instant apocalypse, that we read about in other sci-fi books. This is this gradual, grinding you down, ongoing thing that that like there's always these slight glimmers of hopes that somebody's going to come in and fix the country or do something to turn things around and stuff like that. And it's it's all very slight, and some people don't believe it and others do. Other people in here, they're like, yeah, it's gonna turn around. It's not always gonna be bad. And so it's not like if it was just a flat out apocalypse and you're trying to keep the human race going or something like that, then you could definitely see you'd have no problem with this matchup whatsoever,
Yeah.
But there is that edge to their relationship, and I think Butler does explore it a little bit, and I think what her reasons are for doing it that way, I'm not sure, but she doesn't shy away from it at all. She does explore those awkward moments between them or between when other people see them. And so it's very interesting, and it's very, once again, I think I'm oversaying this maybe, but it's so well done. and unbelievable how she does it in actually such little pages.
yeah, no, I agree. And I think we don't tend to focus a lot on the awkwardness because it's all first person
Yeah.
journal from Lauren's point of view. So she must think that it's okay, or she's convinced herself that it is, or she feels okay. That's why she's in this relationship. So, yeah, since we don't get other POVs, it's kind of sad. But also, it's a way to foreshadow his death immediately in the next chapter when he says, I'm not going to be around for when you finish building all of that. And then he's gone. And I was really, I wanted him to die of old age, and he didn't. Like I just wanted him to grow old and die peacefully instead of being whatever shot by these people who came
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
take away their lives from them.
Another gut punch.
Yeah. And it was just thrown in there. Like it wasn't she didn't harp on it. She said we walked past the graves and we were forced to, and this is how all these people found out which
Yeah.
of their loved ones died. And she included the line about Bankole in that. So, and that hit harder somehow
Yeah.
than if she had written an entire paragraph about how she lost her husband.
Yeah. It was just because the enslaving of all we saw was her and the other women because they separated them. So the enslaving of her and the women in that cramped place or wherever they were, that was the big dramatic thing. So everything else was a side note, even the fact that her husband was dead. But in her storytelling, she's just as restrained as she was restrained by the caller. She couldn't react too much. She couldn't do anything that was going to set that thing off. And Butler almost wrote that in the same manner, that we had to see it as a side note. We had to see it that way because she's trying to put us in the same boat as the character. And so good.
Yeah. That whole thing, this has been one of the hardest hitting books that I've read recently. There were many places where I had to just like put the book down, take a few minutes, and then pick it back up. It was hard. It was, and the first book was difficult as it was. This was so much harder, especially and so soon after the baby's born. You have to wonder
Oh, I know.
how did she get to the point where she's writing these books about her mother? How did she
That's the
even
mystery.
survive
Yeah.
that? Yeah. And yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other sort of action-oriented stuff that we didn't cover yet. We already talked a little bit about their potential move to Halstead.
Yeah.
Mhm. And Dan coming back, not you, Dan, but the Dan in this book. Although Dan did come back after a break of a week. And yeah, his death too, that was really hard hitting.
Yeah.
When he brought his sister back, when he did the
And-
impossible.
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go
His
ahead.
sister coming back just for this to happen, that's
Yeah.
also
Yeah. That was
Ugh.
terrible.
Damn. I'm breaking up here.
I don't know. I want to think that in these, I don't know, that people wouldn't be this bad in this sort of world, but I don't know if they probably would, given that people are right now doing similar things. So, and like slavery does exist right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, but I would hope most people would not be this, because it seems at this point like a lot of people are behaving in very
Yeah.
bad ways. Let's say.
Yeah, there's very few people looking out for each other, and most people trying to see what they can grab from the next person. And when she goes, yeah, and there are moments when you're like, yeah, don't flaunt what you have. And even though she's not really flaunting, she's just trying to spread the goodness a little bit, I suppose. Like when she goes to the slavers to see if Dan's sister is among those that they found, and she decides to give them some of the produce from her community, right? She's doing a good thing, but I was feeling terrified for her, because I'm like, you're telling all these people that you have some wealth that they can come after, and it's possible that we're seeing the worst of it. Of course, we are. It's possible that there are more good people than there are bad, but they are the quiet ones, right? They're not the ones who are out trying to save the world. It's the people who are causing damage that make the impact to make things bad, right? The people who are sort of living by themselves, they're just carrying on, and there's not much change as long as that's just the case.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to go now because my phone is dying, and I also need to.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll read up to the end of chapter 17, I think, next time. We'll talk on the forum, but yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the discussion. Bye.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Dan.
Thanks. Yeah, bye.
Did you have anything else, Jared, or should we move on to the monster?
Yeah. I think 8. Well, maybe end of 17. You said.
Yeah, end of 17 or end of
Yeah, that
16,
works.
either way. Yeah. We'll read from my copy, we'll read 100 pages 1 week and 90 pages 1 week. It can be
Yeah, that
90,
works. That's
100,
good.
or 190. So,
Yep, that's perfect.
yeah. So,
Awesome. All right.
so
The
ready to talk about
Monster.
Monster by Gerard Klein. Oh, Chris is not here, so we don't have a summary. Do you have a summary, Jared?
This is a tale of first contact, basically.
Yes.
And it's so a woman. What's her name? I can't remember her name.
Marion, yeah.
Marion has hears a voice and goes out and just she hears all the news releases of this monster or alien in the woods or the park or wherever it was, and then she hears her name being called, and she goes out to find out why. So it was a moody riveting tale that I thought had a pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it had a pretty cool ending. I thought it was. I thought it
Yeah.
was very interesting. I liked the style. I like the style. I like the writing, and I thought his descriptions were great.
Yeah.
And I really liked how he approached this kind of first contact thing. It was it kind of reminded me of Annihilation a bit.
Yes. Yeah, some of the monsters in there, right?
Yeah.
It did.
So,
And the descriptions of how the sound was seeping into the very atmosphere around her, that the voice of the quote
yeah.
unquote monster was seeping into the soil and the plants and everything. Yeah, I agree with you, Jared. The descriptions are kind of brilliant there.
Yeah, he had a lot of great descriptions like that, and like just lines like a rain of footsteps beat upon the dusty asphalt of the streets. Lines like that, just
Yeah.
really great imagery and that includes sound and include just your senses. And I really enjoyed his writing. I thought it was the translation, I guess. I'm not sure how that works, but because
Yeah.
it was translated by Damon Knight, and he really, I don't know if the German version is it German or French? I forget, but
French, I think.
the French version, I don't know if that has that same the same feel that this story does when translated. I hope it does, because I thought it was beautiful, and I really like how even the first line, "Night was ready to fall." That tells you so much. It gives you this sense of things ending, and then a little bit further on, it tells you of news ran through the town, leaping from mouth to ear, so that it gives you this sense of information disseminating throughout the area.
Yeah.
And these things are like, in the way it's described, it's all scary and stressful,
Yeah.
and it's just set the mood so brilliantly. Like that first paragraph, I was hooked. I was like, yep, this story's good.
Yeah, same. I've highlighted the first line too, and especially how it ends. Really, at night, about nightfall, releasing in its fall the precise clockwork of the stars. How beautiful is that?
Yeah, lovely story. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like we were discussing our favorites last week,
Yeah.
and
If
if
you
I
had
had
read
read
this,
this one, it
yeah,
might have made it. It might have made
nice.
the top 3. I was just like, wow, this was
Yeah.
great, and I read it today. So it's just like it's fresh in my mind. I'm just like, this is great.
And how you described it, like the news disseminating, the voice of the beast sort of spreading. It's a lot of things that are spreading through the air and the atmosphere, right? Yeah, that's an interesting sort of description theme as the
Yeah.
undercurrent of the story. So I had a question for you. Like, what did you think of this line? So should I tell you what I made of it before or after? Okay, so I had a theory at this line that I'm about to read to you, that she herself is an alien, and she had come here before, and now there is another alien of her, like her, on this planet. But there was not much later on to corroborate that, other than it wasn't super clear to me if she was the only one, for instance, who heard the voice of the beast and interpreted it as her husband's. But they did tell her that the beast swallowed her husband, and like they seem to be very sure that that it's just regurgitating his memories or whatever. So maybe they're all right and this theory is just dead. But this line really stood out to me. Yeah, so they about the people who are trying to decide whether the beast is safe or not. The creature would wait, calm and trusting, for them to hold out their hands and talk to it. And then it would go to them, quivering with anxiety, until, listening to their incomprehensible voices, as she had listened to Bernard's a year ago, it would suddenly understand. So she seems to know a lot about exactly what's going on in this beast's head. And she apparently did something similar. Like she would suddenly understand. She apparently suddenly understood something. So Bernard came to her and she understood. So do you think that creature will eventually become shapeshift into a human and live among them? And now there'll be a yeah. I went far. I went very far from this line. Like I had all kinds of theories just based on this.
That's a deep read, Vasha.
or an unnecessarily wide, crazy read.
Yeah. Well, admittedly, I did not think of that. So that's good. Yeah, no, I was definitely more on the side of the alien absorbed or ate or whatever it did to Bernard, and it kind of took on his some of his traits, and because that part of it reminded me of Annihilation, so I was
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
I was kind of going down that path, and I just I mean, who knows? Marion was pretty brave to just you know run away from all the authorities and run right into the arms of this crazy alien creature that was calling her name. So maybe you're onto something there. Maybe she knew something, but I don't know. There were certain times where she was acting a little too human. With the cigarettes and the
Yeah.
and the
Yeah, no, I agree. It was only this one line, and I was waiting to see if that would be the reveal, and it certainly wasn't. But then now I'm wondering what the hell that line meant about her going to Bernard and understanding everything a year ago.
yeah. Maybe they had a marital breakthrough. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Simple and boring, yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Cool.
It was interesting because she was saying, she's listening to the radio basically, and it's just talking about mundane stuff, the frying pan in the cupboard and what have you, and she was like, "Keep calm." She's talking to herself, "Keep calm. Thousands of people have gone through the park tonight. And nothing's happened to them."
Yeah.
Because she was worried about her husband. She
Yeah.
didn't know yet that he was already an alien or eaten by the alien. But the line that stuck out to me was, "Things never happen to people you know, only to grave faces with unlikely names in the newspapers." And it's just like, how appropriate is that for
Yeah.
everybody in life many times, Oh, it only happens to people there. When you hear about the hurricanes in Florida, or you hear about the fires in LA right now, oh, it only happens to them.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to us, and that just reminded me that was just a great statement that applied to Marion's situation, or so we thought at the time, or so Marion thought at the time.
Yeah.
But really is a statement that applies to many people who just don't see the reality of bad things happening to other people. It's just something that happens somewhere else and doesn't
Yeah.
happen to them. And
Something you can abstract out and not think
yeah,
about too
yeah.
much. Yeah.
So that was great.
Yeah. There's also this bit I really loved about I guess she keeps calming herself by telling herself that the people on the radio sound cheerful and like they know what they're talking about. They are making sense. So like she's allowing herself to stay calm because of that. But then there was this bit, and it came to her mind that something was being hidden behind the calm screen of the loudspeaker and the words embroidered with confidence. She thought suddenly that perhaps they were trembling as they spoke. Perhaps their hands were clenching convulsively on the microphone while they pretended to be sure of themselves. Perhaps their faces were horribly pale in spite of the red glare of the dark lanterns. That was brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was brilliant, and once again, it gave you that. There was a sense of stress there,
Yeah.
and just spookiness, and yeah, just great. The whole thing was really, I thought it was just well done. That was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Good story. Yep, I enjoyed this one.
Yeah, and even the way that he spelled Marion with the capital letters in different places
Yeah.
when the aliens speak in her name.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny.
Different stresses, yeah. Yeah. Who are you? Read the
But
voice. Yeah.
who were these lame soldiers who just let her get by them? I don't know.
Yeah, I know I'm not getting close enough to the monster, so she can go if she wants.
Yeah.
Not running after her. Cool. Do you think they shot the monster or that it escaped somehow?
Well, that I love how it ends. How it
Yeah.
doesn't really tell you what became of the monster. You get this a broken branch, a liquid rustling, a stifled oath, a click,
Yeah.
and then it ends, and it's just like,
Yep.
ah,
Fade to black. Done. What?
yep. But
Tell
that's
me
brilliant.
more.
Once again, brilliant.
Yeah.
We don't need to see the bullets go into the monster or whatever.
Yeah. I like the story. I really liked it. And as we talked about it, I like it a lot more.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. Nice. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Excellent. So we will see everybody next week with I don't know, I think up to the end of chapter 17 for Parable of the Talents and The Man Who Lost the Sea by Theodore Sturgeon. That's a very interesting name for the story. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.